All right, so introducing Chris McMurray. I'm going to share my screen again because Chris is next up to introduce us all to what's going on with EduJedi. So Chris McMurray is our Vice President, EduJedi Leadership Society, and he's going to be talking with us about the new responsibilities for leaders that kind of go beyond what Ivy was talking about with digital citizenship. This goes deeper. So this is sort of like Chris is about to level you up, in terms of where this is all going. So I'm going to turn it over to you and give you the mouse control.
Perfect. Thank you. So this is a great segue. I was listening to Mary speaking about elasticity and things like that, and where we should be going and where system sort of mindfulness of system design is, and what comes along with that is exactly what we're going to talk briefly about today and sort of skip over the surface of, because it's a deep topic and there's a lot to understand about responsibilities and shifting roles and things like that, and the kind of knowledge that you need to have as sort of a platform or a building block in order to do the job as it's designed today, right? And it's evolving today. So I'm super happy to have that opportunity today.
Okay, so Tech, you have mouse control.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. There we go.
Okay, good. All right.
I got it. I'm in. That's me. So thanks. Yeah. Whoops.
Oops.
Uh-oh.
That was me. I was trying to turn off my camera.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. You
no
have
worries.
mouse control.
Okay, I can fast forward. It's good.
Okay.
So today we're talking about some changing responsibilities, and I'm going to share some information about the digital learning experience standards for administrators and teachers and learners. And before I leap into this characteristic scale, I want to make sure that we understand that what I'm going to share with you first is kind of the why. It's going to be some context for the standards that we're going to get into a little bit later. I'm also going to share a little bit of information about a model for designing those experiences. And I love the idea of elasticity that came up. What's really very exciting to me is that this WebEx technology is helping us to actually do the things that we know are necessary and that we can do. And so now we finally have some technology available. The really smart people have gotten their brains together and have come up with these things. So what we're talking about is, just as Lonnie had mentioned before, we're going way deeper than digital citizenship, right? This is diving into how do you know what resources you're supposed to be using, for example, as a learner, and what type of learner agency are you expected to exercise, and then as educators, how do we help learners to get into that? So I'm going to start here with the digital curriculum characteristic scale. This is actually going to be critical as you start to identify which pieces to use within your ecosystem. And so, for example, one of the administrator standards is that the institution conducts routine inventory of all knowledge objects or learning objects, right? That's great. It's fantastic, except that if you don't really understand how to identify or name those and where those exist within a scale of sophistication, it's going to be really hard to then evaluate those for efficacy and then know which ones of those are going to make it easier for your teachers to design an engaging experience, and then also which ones of those are going to have the greatest impact when the learners get a hold of them in the experience. So on this particular document right here, the slide that you're looking at, from left to right, we go from sort of low level kind of knuckle dragging types of objects with the digital document. Not that it's bad, right? But a digital document is just what it is, right? It's a Word doc. It's a Google Doc. It's fairly static. It doesn't really do anything. Yes, you can link to and from it, but it really doesn't have context, right? It's the smallest bit of information that you could imagine building with. And then we move up into things like single loop animations. These resources and these types of learning objects are essentially, it's a sliding, something slides in from the left-hand side in a slide deck, right? It's very simple. It's rudimentary. It's not intended to do anything more than that, and it might raise the engagement level, but not significantly. It's really not adding to the experience significantly. So you can see as we move to the right, we move into video, right? And so as we get further toward the right-hand side of this slide, we start tiptoeing into elements or characteristics that allow interaction and give more control to the learner. So video is really sort of the first time that we start to see people creating a video, learners getting a hold of that video, and then being able to modulate within that experience. And that's important, right? That's noteworthy because now all of a sudden I can pause, I can stop, I can fast forward, I can replay multiple times. It's like the YouTube. It's awesome and it works, and it comes up the level, right? We're getting more sophisticated until we get to collections, right? Collections are just that. All of a sudden, all those bits that existed to the left are now contextualized, and they have connectivity, right? They do things. They start to, you can search for them. They're tied to standards. They're more three-dimensional, as much as something like that could be. And those are fantastic. There's a bunch of those resources out there in the world and in the wild. And that's, if you're building your ecosystem, that's a good one to grab. And so that causes a line, right? So there's a line right in the middle of that. As soon as we flip over into the feedback level, that feedback level is the first time that all of a sudden the machine is actually taking a lot more load off of the teacher, right? So if you've got a feedback level resource, the resource is actually starting to answer questions. It's actually starting to provide some information based on input. It's starting to do some of the work that a human might do at a certain level. Not that we're taking the place of that, but as Mary was talking about, I was listening to the classroom, the smart classroom, right? You walk in the room, it scans the faces, it already knows what basics need to be set up in order to be effective. That's awesome, right? Because that's taking the load off of you. That's stuff you don't have to do. As the teacher, you don't have to do that because boom, the machine's doing it. The feedback level is starting to get there, right? So it's starting to do those things. Now we move up into the coding level, and that's not really, by coding, I mean amateur coding. So this is like a website, right? So this is like a website that a teacher can create. Even I could do it, and the learner can navigate around, right? They can move around within that space. They can go laterally if they need to. There's no ceiling. They can go do the things that they need to do in order to enrich their experience. It's going to lead them to other resources, and there's context, and it does a good job of helping them be immersed into an experience around learning. And it has tendrils into multiple content areas, and it's just a good thing. The top of that scale, right, is the digital courseware, and this is highly designed. This is a world that is immersive. It's leveraging all types of input technology, and it's using AI. It's using a lot of the technology that's allowing some predictive modeling and things like that to occur. And so what you see is that as we move over toward that, the teacher is now freed up to go do things that are human things and build those relationships and strengthen the social emotional aspects of those experiences, and really start to do what they do best, right? Because we've allowed the machine to take over some of those aspects. So we're moving from more instructional planning needed on the left-hand side all the way over to the more automated learning on the right-hand side, and that's a positive move. You have to understand that as an administrator, as a central office administrator or a building admin, even as a teacher, you need to understand the building blocks that you're working with as you start to meet those standards. So the routine inventory, that sort of thing. So the next piece that I want to share is another scale, and there we go. So this is actually a scale that it's not brand new, right? So this actually occurs in that thumbnail document that's up there on the left-hand side. You can download that from the website, the Learning Council website. And so as you start to inventory, and as you start to think about, okay, I've got a sea of stuff out there in my ecosystem. My ClassLink dashboard is chock full of great things. You're going to be at a point where you have a fiscal responsibility at the very least, to start thinking about which of those things can I evaluate out, and which of those things should I keep. And so this scale here really does a good job of helping you to understand how to evaluate and think about those applications. The top half of this graphic really is relative to amateur author, where the bottom half is the professionally coded resources. And again, we're going from granular to aggregated, right? So we're going from the concept level, which is a bit, right? That's just a piece of information. It's the smallest unit to those bits being contextualized, and that broadens it just a little bit up to the courses and ebooks level, which then provides the context and then allows mobility within those. So we're at that amateur course ebook type of a thing, type of a level. And those are right. If you're selecting and evaluating, you always want to be moving up toward that more sophisticated level, because those are going to be the more effective building blocks for design. Similarly, the professionally coded level, this is the short form, long form type of a discussion. We move from the bit, right, which is in this instance is the applet or the app, and this is great, right? This might be a math app, math facts app, and it's good, right? It's good at what it does, but it only does one thing, and it's finite. And yes, it might have levels, but in terms of building an experience with that building block, that's going to be way more labor intensive for the user and the builder. And so you want to move up into some more sophisticated levels. We start moving into course and courseware levels, and this is where we see gamification concepts coming in, and then move all the way up into that collection level, where we're starting to use AI, right? We're using machine learning. We're seeing some predictive engines being used, and that's where we want to be living. So if you have an idea of where you're going, right? If you're following the standards for an administrator, and you're being mindful of the progress and moving the machine forward, selecting those tools that are going to be most effective or more sophisticated is a responsibility. That's the thing that we should be pushing for, and let's allow the machines to do the things that they do best. So this is good background, because this is going to show up again in the standards later on. If you haven't, by the way, downloaded the EduJedi dictionary, it's a must read. It has a lot of information in it. It's a great tag along piece, and I'll show some examples of that in a little bit. But all of these scales, right, and all of this background information is directly relative to those standards, and you'll see that this type of information is necessary in order to dig deeper into those standards. So what I wanted to transition now to is kind of connected to what our friend from Cisco was talking about, and a good number of other folks in the last couple of days. And so this graphic is it's a little overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff on it, and there's a lot of color and arrows and moving things. And what this represents is, very simplistically, what systems look like, and what can be described as a digital load. And so what you see in here represented is all of the things that go into the ability to support the building of and designing of learning experiences that leverage technology. So, for example, the little blue section, that's all your rostering systems, that's your access management, it's your portals, your paywalls, all the things, the scheduling platform, all of those things that sort of run behind the scenes, right? But then facilitate some of the automated activity. And then you've got the brown section sort of down there. This is your security level. This is data house, warehousing. This is all of those repository sort of analytics, all of that level of stuff. Also behind the scenes, but it is getting to top of mind, right? Because security should be top of mind for your chief academic officer levels, right? Any of your C level folks should be thinking about that. And so what you see down there on the left-hand side, also that green bar, is the level of technology that is the LMS, right? And this is the SIS, and these are all the facilities management stuff. There's fiscal management. We're starting to get closer to the day-to-day activity that supports a school, if not within the school. And so then you see, it's a lot of stuff, right? And then you see sort of the stair-stepped graphic there, and this really describes very, very simply what now exists as you get down to the classroom level. And so as you see grade level changes being made, different resources by grade level, and hopefully not different resources by classroom within a grade level within a building, because right, all of a sudden we've got equity issues when that's happening. But what this describes, and this was actually the first time that we were able to actually see what we had created for people, right? And so in the classroom, from the very beginning, with technology, right? We felt it, right? We felt this coming, and as a building principal, same, felt a change, struggled to define it and articulate it, but this graphic was created by the Learning Council with the help of a lot of educators across the country, and in listening and helping to sort of analyze what's going on. This is a load, right? We created a digital load, and this is important for us to understand, because now we can say, oh yeah, actually we did this to ourselves. So yes, it is more important that we do an inventory routinely, and yes, it is more important that we select effective tools and tools that are going to be more sophisticated and easier to use for designers and learners. So on the side of that, what was missing from this is essentially some logistics planning, right? And some logistics functions are missing from this thing. And some of the scheduling and some of the auto cohorting is what you see on the right-hand side. And so this is really what we're moving toward in the hybrid model architecture, because what we do want to get to is personalized learning, right? And that's the thing. And now we have the technology to do it, but it's going to take logistics, right? It's going to take a function of technology that's going to auto cohort, right? It's going to auto schedule. It's going to know what's on your calendar as you walk into the room, and it's going to help you to move to those places. And that's the piece that we're struggling to get to. It's new, and it's going to take some mindset shift. But I wanted to share this because this describes the digital load and all the things that you're going to have to take a look at as an administrator, and some of the things that you're going to have to be aware of and be able to have proficiency with as a teacher, but then also as a learner, because the learner is going to have to be able to navigate the LMS, right? And they're going to have to be, in some instances, integrating or interacting with the SIS, and so all of that stuff is now the responsibility of everybody in the system. So when we start talking about standards, and the standard talks about the institution constructing a model or graphic, right? That's what we're talking about. You got to have that. If you don't have a picture of your ecosystem, you got to get one, right? You have to develop that. You have to start working on that, because how else do you know what's out there? So this is important, and it's important background information for you to have as you start to move forward. I'm going to skip through the dictionary very quickly because you can take a look at it yourself. I'll share a couple of examples. And so the categories are self-explanatory, right? They really help you to navigate the dictionary and figure out what it is that you need to go find. The examples that I'm showing, you can see that the definition is written in English, right? It's something that I can understand, but then there's also information within the dictionary and that definition that gives you an example of what you might want to go talk to your IT compatriots about, and begin to have that common vocabulary, right? The standard set, the dictionary, the model for digital for learning design experience. All of those things combine to create the vernacular for change, right? And evolution and forward movement. So this is all critical information for your executive level. Things like gating, you have to understand that, right? You need to understand that this could be a beneficial characteristic within your design, but also within the resources that you're selecting. And if you don't understand it, then it's going to be mumbo jumbo maybe. And yet this is important. You have to understand that you're either artificially limiting your kids by gating them or ungating them and allowing the ceiling to be lifted and for kids to move at their own pace. So hostile characteristics, again, another good one to understand. modal, all of those things. Nesting is important, right? Because we start talking about standards for teachers and standards for learners, and nesting is one of those things. It shows up in the standards, and how you organize information is very important, and you have a responsibility to understand that. It's naming conventions, right? It's foldering. It's all the things that go into making information easy to access and get back to, and that's critical. So those definitions exist, and they support the standards. So I'm going to hop into the standards now very quickly. And this is a lot of information to sort of lay down, but I definitely encourage you to take a deep look at those standards. So the standards for administrators are talking about selection and management of digital curriculum and systems, right? So very simply, that's the bottom line, because you do have responsibility now. And as we move into what is now normal and what will be evolving as the experience in the school systems, you've got a new set of stuff. And people always say, oh my gosh, new standards, what? No, we barely understood the other thing, and now there's this. Well, yes, and yep, it's going to be work, and it's going to be hard work, and your brain's going to hurt, and it just will. And yet you have to do it. You have to move forward. Not moving forward isn't an option. So the standards, as you look at them, are essentially organized into three major chunks, right? So the beginning stage of those standards is really talking about the tools and the stuff, right? So we're talking about routine inventory of knowledge objects. We're talking about process in place for selection and evaluation. We're talking about meeting accessibility requirements and the things, right? We're talking about how does the tool act. The next section of those standards really talks about designing the experience, and it's relative to designing a learning experience. And so it discusses things like for example, the completeness of the object, how much content, what's the scope of that content, and that's where those lie. The last section really talks about program, right? So we're talking about how does this move forward, or how does it promote student agency or higher levels of critical thinking and things like that, analysis. Any to take cost as levels, right? Any of those top level functions, that's what this is talking about. And then in the context of digital curriculum and systems. So that's an important piece to understand. Here's three examples, and there's many, and so these examples are sort of what I talked about a minute ago. The institution is weighing the impact of free resources, right? We're looking at working toward full individualization and personalization, right? That's common vocabulary that has to be understood within your system, and you have a responsibility to define that and flip over some rocks and figure out what it is that you're working with, because you're going to have to design a system with what you have and go get new things that you don't have. So working toward increasing digital pathways, right? And the term workflow shows up in these standards. Workflow is a real thing, right? And that's what I mentioned before in terms of navigation and logistics. We gotta start focusing on the workflow. And it's just as Mary was talking about very, very recently, how do you set up an environment that and leverage the technology that allows people to move and flow and exist within an experience. That's a responsibility. So there's more in there. The teachers are really talking about responsibilities in a nutshell: composition and systems, learning design, and student oversight, right? Those three things are sort of the basis of the experience and the job of teaching, right? Obviously it's a huge job, it's two jobs, but relative to this set of standards, that's what we're talking about: composition, learning design. The standards for students are also talking about and relative to the technology and the tools. And what we're talking about here with the students or the learners is really how are they prepared to exercise agency in using systems and tools in order to add to their experience, right? And questions of interface and questions of assessment and proof show up in those standards. So all of this leads to not only some background information and some base level knowledge about tools to now that we know all of this stuff, what do we do with it, right? And so having a model is really important, and we've all used them. If we've been in the classroom and we've been administrators, we've used these models, and there are some things missing, right? There's some great models out there. Addie's is used in this example as sort of a comparison, right, Addie's is whatever 45 years old. It's fine. It's fine. But what it's missing is that it's missing the learner, right? And it's missing some components of experience that need to show up in order for us to move forward and continue to evolve. So what you see in this slide is really the comparison of those two. And you see the Addie's model, and it starts talking about analysis, and we sort of start in that level. We start talking about organization, and this is really learner goals, and right, it's problems being solved, but that's all relative to teacher activity, right? It's not really, doesn't include the learner directly. And as you move over to the right, same thing, right? Same thing shows up: design, deep dive into the course, training structure. You see language in there in that model that starts to talk about planning for teaching versus designing learning, and those are two very separate things. As you move into as you take away from the last 2 days, that's a critical distinction to make. We have to stop giving time to planning for teaching, and we have to start moving time to designing learning experiences. So the EduJedi model pictured below is going to help with that, right? It's going to help with two things. It's divided into two major chunks or categories: the workflow logistics design category and the discovery design category. And so along that workflow logistics design, we start from the left and moving to the right. And so we're talking about scope, we're talking about mapping, we're talking about how do we start to see this in 3 dimensions. And
Chris,
yep.
we're down to a minute.
Okay, gotcha. Yep.
Okay.
So the EduJedi model really starts to help you to design those experiences, and what it's forcing you to do is to be mindful of what the learner is doing, and will help you to move along in that way. So I know that we're out of time, and there's a lot that goes into that. There's an example. If you download you'll have this slide deck, and so there's a brief example of what that might look like for a math experience. And we're going to continue to evolve these. We're going to continue to move forward and help people to understand these standards, and sit side by side with executive staff and leaders in the buildings and leaders in the systems to help people to continue to move forward. So yes, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay.
Lots to get into, and some deeper discussions. For sure, keep checking back, because we're gonna have this conversation rolling for the next several years.
Yeah, we've had like over 22 meetings now with the EduJedi and all of this, and the new resource guide is coming out. We'll be bringing it in print to this region when we come next February. So we're excited, but if you want to read all about it right now, it is all online in the report and in this on the site. So that's just for something to know. Got to put my camera on. Okay, so hi everyone, and thank you very much, Chris, for the overview there.